The government says, sir, they are using the revenues they are collecting from the fuel taxes to ensure, as I said, public expenditure through pro-poor schemes. Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, the Kisan Samman Yojana, that those whose incomes are hurting in pandemic times, the government is reaching out to them. They claim this is the fact that should be recognized, which the opposition isn't. How do you respond to that?
Less said about it, the better. The 20 lakh crore package, which the Prime Minister announced and the Finance Minister rolled out in installments, has been torn to pieces. The World Bank, IMF, economists have estimated that the real fiscal stimulus component of that 20 lakh crore was about 1.1% of GDP. I estimated, along with my colleagues, it was perhaps 1.3% of GDP. And the one that we announced a few weeks ago, it was announced in the morning and it vanished in the evening because it was a repetition of the earlier announcements. The additionality was barely 25,000 or 35,000 crore. What are we talking about? We're talking about countries giving a fiscal stimulus by direct cash transfer, by increasing pensions, by giving rebates on tax. Directly, you must transfer cash to the people. That, in India, the fiscal stimulus part of the so-called grand packages was no more than about 1.5% of GDP, which is a pittance.
You know, Mr. Chidambaram, listening to you, it's clear there are two views at the moment on the state of the economy. There are critics like you who are, or others who are saying we are heading towards stagflation, that growth has petered out. Government policy makers insist that we are now entering a V-shaped economy phase. The truth lies somewhere in between. Am I correct?
How many times have we heard about this V-shaped recovery? And I read a very interesting page in Kaushik Basu's latest book, a journal. He says, take any alphabet of the English language, you can always find an economist who says the recovery will be the shape of that alphabet. We've heard of B, we've heard of L, we've heard of T, we've heard of V, we've heard of W. So please put aside these shibboleths. Question is, what is recovery? I explained this morning. In 2019-20, at constant prices, we had a certain level of GDP, constant prices. In 2020-21, the first pandemic year, we dipped by huge negative, something like 23% or so. Now in 21-22, there will be a recovery because the base is a negative base. What IMF chief economists call a mathematical recovery, an arithmetical recovery, a statistical recovery. There will be a recovery. There will be a positive number. There are positive numbers because of a negative base and constant prices in 21-22 cross the GDP of 19-20. When it crosses the GDP of 19-20, there is growth. But until it crosses the GDP of 19-20, there is no growth.
You know, listening to you, Mr. Chidambaram, there will be those who will ask, if everything is so bad, if fuel inflation is up as we accept, if jobs are being lost, which is true, if incomes are losing out in pandemic times, why don't we see greater anger of all of this on the street from the Indian middle class? Clearly, the Indian middle class seems to trust the Modi government that it will get its act together, or the opposition is unable to effectively translate Indian middle class anger into some kind of protest.
I have no answer to the question. You should put this to the Indian middle class. The Indian middle class has given up its vanguard position during the freedom struggle, during the great debate in the 1950s and 60s about what economic model India should follow, during the emergency, which was a bad patch, during Dr. Manmohan Singh's regime to some extent. The middle class was active, articulate, vocal. Now the middle class is completely silent. Now, there could be many reasons. One, the pandemic. We are scared to come out and speak and participate in debate. There's very little debate going on, very little open debate because of the pandemic. Second could be fear. Even if Disha Ravi, a student of Bangalore, puts out a tweet, she's thrown in prison for months. Therefore, there could be fear. The middle class is mortally feared of being arrested, thrown into jail, and denied bail for many weeks or many months. It could also be pandemic, it could be other reasons. You should ask the middle class. Why don't you assemble a group of middle class people and ask this question?
I'll give you a third reason. The third reason could be the state of the opposition. The credibility of the Congress and the opposition to really effectively speak out on these issues in a manner that you can convince people that you have a better model.
See, all I can speak for is the Congress party. We are doing our best. Our best may not be good enough. In your evaluation, our best may not be good enough. But we are protesting. We are in the streets. We hold demonstrations. In Punjab, they even slapped cases on people who had some buffaloes pull a car or something like that. We are addressing press conferences all over India today, tomorrow, day after. We are doing our best. The criticism that can be leveled against us, the best is not good enough. You should do more. That criticism I accept. And I will take it to my heart. We should do more. But the point is, unless the people see the writing on the wall. Now today, for example, the Prime Minister said, the third wave is imminent. Now what will happen if there is a third wave? The jobs lost in the first and second wave have not come back. The incomes and wages that were cut or reduced in the first and second wave have not come back. If there is a third wave, people will be hurt more. There will be more job losses, more income cuts, more wage cuts, more layoffs, more retrenchment. It will make it worse. So this is the time not only to take medical steps to prevent a third wave or to mitigate the effects of a third wave. It is time to take economic steps to mitigate the economic hardships of a third wave. But the government is clueless. The government is not even talking about economic preemptive steps to mitigate the effect of a third wave of the pandemic.
Let's leave it there, Mr. Chidambaram. It's always good to hear a voice who speaks from experience as finance minister. You're in the opposition, so perhaps you have every right to take on the government. We'll await a government response. But for now, thank you very much for joining me here on the inflation challenge and more.